welcome to Ebony Storytelling. How are you doing today? We are going to be reading a story, and this time we're going to start off by reading the Bible, which is over there. Then we are going to be doing the synopsis. Then we are going to be doing Twice Free. Aren't we doing 14?
I think it's 13.
No, it was 14.
It's wherever the bookmark is.
14.
What?
Yeah.
Did we read 3 chapters yesterday?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, we did. Okay, 14 then. 14 it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, got it.
my dad got it wrong, but we are going to be reading Twice Read, and I hope you guys enjoy the video. Granny Bear's on! Yay!
What do they want to do?
Two
What do you
people.
want them to do if they like it?
Hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss another video. Now I'm going to go draw some Among Us stuff.
Got something in your hair. Hi. So, we're on English Standard Version of the Bible, Psalm 33 and 34 today. So, I will just go ahead and begin. Psalm 33. Shout for joy in the Lord, O you righteous. Praise befits the upright. Give thanks to the Lord with the lyre. Make melody to him with the harp of 10 strings. Sing to him a new song. Play skillfully on the strings with loud shouts. For the word of the Lord is upright, and all his work is done in faithfulness. He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their host. He gathers the waters of the sea as a heap. He puts the deeps in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. Let all the inhabitants of the world. I think I said of the word.
Yeah.
Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in front of him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the peoples. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people whom he has chosen as his heritage. The Lord looks down from heaven. He sees all the children of man. From where he sits enthroned, he looks out on all the inhabitants of the earth. He who fashions the hearts of them all and observes all their deeds, the king is not saved by his great army. A warrior is not delivered by his great strength. The war horse is a false hope for salvation, and by its great might it cannot rescue. I think we covered that in a previous video during the Ben-Hur era. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his steadfast love, that he may deliver their soul from death and keep them alive in famine. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. For our heart is glad in him, because we trust in his holy name. Let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, even as we hope in you. Psalm 34 of David, when he changed his behavior before Abimelech, so that he drove him out, and he went away. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried out, and the Lord heard him. and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. O fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is there who desires life and loves many days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears toward their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them from the earth. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. Affliction will slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the life of his servants. None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. That is the end of the Bible reading for this evening. I hope that you are enjoying the word of the Lord, and my phone is not in the little holder very well, so I don't want it to fall. Just need to adjust it real fast. Okay, and now at this time, if I can get her away from her picture drawing, we have the wonderful, the one, the only Kimberly to give us the synopsis. Here she is. In her PJs.
Yep, they're fuzzy.
In the PJs.
Warm PJ day.
Warm PJ day.
Yep, they're my fuzzy PJs. So what? A little distraction, I guess. A while back, Mom got them for me in Oklahoma, where it actually was cold, kind of consistently in December. Hey, Becca. And then we came here, and I'm like, well, I won't need these anymore. Guess I'm wrong. So what happened in the last chapter was, Onesimus, I got it right this time, not Eeyore. Yep, last time I said Eeyore. But Onesimus, what happened was, there was this guy who was going to go over to, I forget the names, I'm sorry. He was going to go over to this place to get medicine for the mistress's daughter. I forget
Irene?
names again. No,
No.
not Irene.
Oh, yeah, I can't ever remember her name either. I'll look it up.
Hey, Gritty Bear. Oh, yeah, my PJs.
It's like Pescasia or
yes,
something.
kind of. Yes, it
kind
was
of-
Pescasia.
Kind of weird like that.
Yeah. It's coffee and hot cocoa. Oh, hi, Jessica.
Coffee and hot cocoa. Oh,
Yep.
okay.
See, this one's hot cocoa.
Oh, okay.
So, what happened was, Pascasia, she hurt her eyes. Oh, that's fine, Jessica. It's okay. You're not that late. And yes, very yummy. My PJs. Look. I can.
Okay. Now we're getting creepy.
Look, it's coffee.
Come on, not
Okay,
Okay,
synopsis.
sorry.
We're not gonna be able to have time for the story.
So what happened was he went over and he met Irene. They had a nice time together. And then what happened was they found out where Paul's gonna be, so they're gonna go over there, with gosh, I forget names. I'm sorry.
Archippus, Philemon.
Yeah, and everybody else, including
Apphia and Onesimus' mother.
Yeah, so they all went, and who is a Christian? Onesimus' mother now. So what happened was they went over, and Onesimus, he stole some stuff from their family, along with the person who was left in charge. They met each other, and they stared at each other, and they're like, if you don't tell me, if you don't tattle, then I won't tattle. So that's basically their agreement. And then what happened was, they came back, and then what happened was, you see, I'm sorry, I forgot the name again. I can't believe I forgot
Who is
it. The guy,
Philemon, Archippus.
Archippus. I can't believe that I keep forgetting that name. I'm sorry. So Archippus, he goes over and he's still crippled.
Oh, because Paul wasn't that great of a apostle after all, huh?
No, because Paul, he said that his ministry was in the place that he lived, and that's where he was supposed to stay and do ministry. And he even had his own sickness that he told them about. So Archippus, Onesimus, he was carrying this sack of grain, and he ran into Archippus on accident, literally. So that happened, and then they talked for a bit, and Onesimus, he was like, why are you so happy? You're crippled, and for as much as we know, you're going to be crippled forever. Why are you so happy? So he explained that he felt fulfilled, and he felt like this was how God wanted to work through him. And he and Onesimus are kind of not enemies anymore. I mean, earlier at least Onesimus despised Archippus, and was the entire reason for his cripple, because he was crippled and everything. So then what happened was, Onesimus, he still is feeling just horrible about what happened, and he can't tell anybody. So that's about it. And the cook inside, who he was getting the grain for, is pretty mad, and came out and was mad, and then saw him with Archippus, and he's like, I'm gonna go back into the kitchen, and then when you come in here, then I'll punish you. So that's how that turned out. And that's about it. I'm gonna hand it over to Dad.
How thoughtful of you.
If you can't tell, I'm rolling my eyes.
If you can't tell, she's rolling her eyes. Hi. So, yes, it's kind of a pajama kind of day. I'm wearing my army sweatpants. So, they don't say army on that side. These were PTs a long time ago, but they're no longer PTs now. They're just comfy pants. And let's see, Daniel's wearing a short sleeve shirt. Mom's wearing a TARDIS jacket, hoodie, sweater, sweatshirt, whatever it's called.
I am under 3 feet
JJ's
of blankets.
under 3 feet of blankets. JJ's in a pajama top with some pants on, and they're all drawing pictures. So that's what they're doing. And what are we doing? Oh, we're going to read a story. All right. So Daniel's like, start the book already. Now you're just wasting time.
Jabberjaw.
All right.
You're
Jabberjaw.
what's it called?
You respect
Jabberjay?
Jabberjay. There we go. All right. So we're going to start chapter 14 now.
Rambling.
It took you that long to come up with the word rambling. It's like my national pastime. So, all right. Okay, JJ, you just broke that pin for no reason. All right, so this is chapter 14, and I will begin. Sorry for... Oh, there was one other thing that I wanted to say. So I've posted the other 5 videos to YouTube, and 3 of the 5 videos are 1 hour and 4 minutes and like less than 10 seconds, which is ironic because I don't even have a timer ticker on this setting. So it like they're all within 5 seconds of each other. 3 of the 5 videos that we posted. So anyway, that's a random fact that doesn't mean anything. It's not relevant to the story. Now we're going to start chapter 14. Time passed and the boys grew, the one in strength and physical beauty, the other in maturity and wisdom. Archippus was now 17 and would never attain his full height and would always drag his twisted body about with the help of a crutch. But during his father's frequent absences he had proved himself an able overseer of the farm and a kind, just master of men. His slaves loved and obeyed him, and seldom took advantage of his weakness. But the one whose friendship he coveted above all others did not love him. Onesimus respected his young master and served him meticulously, but he never spoke to him unless he was obliged to do so, and never remained in his presence a moment longer than was necessary. "Onesimus," said Archippus one night, as his slave was clearing away the evening meal, "I am going to Laodicea tomorrow. Will you prepare my clothes for the journey?" "Yes, master," replied Onesimus. He carried away the vessels and returned and began to lay out the clean tunic and brush the sandals in silence with the utmost deference. He had grown to manhood's height now, but still moved with the grace of an athletic boy, and Archippus sat watching him miserably. The beauty, the rippling muscles, the proud lifted head always woke in him an unconquered ache of longing to be like him, longing to communicate. 2 years had passed since they had sat side by side on the flour sack, but never again had the barrier been lifted. Onesimus was his slave, soft-footed, obedient, irreproachable in his duty, and beyond the mask of servility Archippus might never trespass. "Would you have me attend on you tomorrow, sir?" Onesimus stood in front of him, hands clasped, head slightly bowed, a chattel, without an apparent desire of his own. Archippus could have screamed. "Do you want to come?" he asked, in a voice half pleading, half exasperating. "Your wishes are my wishes, master," replied the boy automatically. He recognized the pleading and half enjoyed the game, for it gave him a strange sense of power. But tonight he wondered whether it was worth it. He would have given much to have gone to Laodicea. It was over 2 years since he had seen her. She would be a child no longer. He tried to imagine her taller, developed in figure, and he decided with a rush of longing to drop the mask. He looked up suddenly, but it was too late. "Oh, very well," Archippus was saying wearily. "If it does not matter to you either way, you had better stay and help with the sheep shearing. There is a gathering of the Christians in the church at Laodicea, and some of the Christian slaves will be coming with me in any case. I shall be meeting my father and Epaphras, who are traveling down from Philadelphia tomorrow, and we will all return together. But be sure my father's apartment is ready before the evening. Good night." He turned away, and there was nothing for Onesimus to do but to reply respectfully and go. Outside in the meadow he cursed himself bitterly for a proud fool, and he was half tempted to humble himself and creep back and kneel at his master's feet and ask to go with him. Although he had never asked anything of Archippus, he knew that he would deny him nothing. He hesitated, turned, and then turned back, scowling. Was this how he wished to face her, meek, servile in the background? 1,000 times no. He would go to her alone, walking as a free man with his head high, or he would not go at all. He picked up a boulder, sent it spinning toward the valley, and cursed again. Then he went home and counted his hoard of coins. It had grown considerably heavier by now, and tomorrow, with Archippus and Philemon safely out of the house, it might even grow a little heavier still. He had been so careful, willing to go so slowly, and because he had never yet failed, he had become so trusted. He sheared the sheep and went about his other duties absent-mindedly the next day, for his thoughts were with Archippus in Laodicea. What was he doing, he wondered. Probably he was singing those same old hymns in some airless inner chamber, wedged in with a lot of sweating slaves and fat Jews. However, perhaps not. The church at Laodicea was renowned for its prosperity and independence, and seemed to have escaped any persecution so far, so perhaps they could hold their meetings comfortably and openly. He did not know, and he didn't care. He wondered, for the 100th time, whether Archippus would see her. Probably not, as Polemon would hardly allow her to go near a Christian gathering, but one never knew. He suddenly wished he had gone after all, if only to have walked the streets where her little feet trod, and to have looked on the scenes that her eyes saw daily. The day drew on, and he saw them returning, far away and earlier than he had supposed possible, a tired little procession climbing between the green wheat fields, Archippus mounted on a horse, and his father walking beside. These long rides on horseback always brought on attacks of pain, and Onesimus ran to the house to prepare his master's couch, and fill the jugs with water, and lay out clean clothing. He was just in time to reach the door and help Archippus alight. "All is ready, master," said Onesimus, helping to support the twisted figure which drooped with weariness. "Shall I help you to bathe and robe before your evening meal?" "No, thank you," said Archippus. "Hand me my crutch, and I'll see to myself." "You need not wait, Onesimus. Good night." With an effort he drew away, his face averted, and limped into the house alone, unnoticed by his parents, who were busy greeting each other. His slave stood watching him for a moment, and then shrugged his shoulders and turned away. "If he likes to struggle with jugs far too heavy for him, let him," he muttered. But he was bitterly hurt and disappointed. He had missed his master more than he had realized, and had been longing to hear what had happened at Laodicea. He wandered moodily over to his hut, and his mother cooked his supper, but it did not cheer him. The very sight of his mother worried him these days. She had grown so thin and coughed so often, and sometimes he noticed her holding her side, her face puckered with suffering. She was often asleep when he came home at night, but she seemed restless in her dreams, and often cried out as though in pain. Yet when he asked her about it, she would laugh and tell him that all was well. "I am in Christ's hands," she would say simply. "Can any evil befall me?" "Well, I suppose you can be taken sick and die in Christ's hands, the same as anywhere else, can't you?" he had answered rudely, and gone off before she had time to reply. He took a few mouthfuls of food, and then pushed the plate away and went out. He thought he would betake himself and this demon of restlessness within him to their canyons, and climb until darkness fell. Even as he strode across the upper meadow, the quietness and the scent of newly mown hay soothed him, and he walked more slowly, and then stood still. He sometimes imagined that on these long, light summer evenings you could hear sounds too small for ordinary human ears: the rustling of the couch grass, the fall of the dew, the folding of the poppy petals, the flight of the homing birds. His gaze came to rest on the shadowed town across the valley, where perhaps she was kneeling by some open window, robed for sleep, looking out on the evening sky. He wondered where her bedroom was, and whether she ever cupped her face in her hands and gazed over at Colossae. Then, suddenly, he was jerked back to reality by a sound that was not imaginary, but clear and very close at hand, the sound of a deep groan. He peeped cautiously round the outcrop of rock, from behind which the sound came, curious but unwilling to become involved in other people's troubles. But instead of seeing and creeping away, he stood rooted to the spot, pride and pity fear, curiosity, all struggling for the mastery. For Archippus sat on the ground, his face hidden in his hands, weeping. Archippus, who had never once since his talk with Paul on the shore spoken of his suffering or complained of his lot. Archippus, who for 2 years had shown a brave, smiling face to the world, was sobbing like a child. Onesimus stepped forward. He feared the light and peace that dwelt in Archippus, but here was darkness and conflict such as he himself knew. He laid his hand on his master's shoulder, and the boy started violently and looked up angry and ashamed at having been discovered by his slave in this moment of weakness. "Leave me," he ordered, but Onesimus, for the first time in his life, openly disobeyed him. Archippus, looking up wonderingly into his eyes, saw not the perfect impersonal slave, but the boy he had grown up with, gazing at him with deep concern and pity. Dashing the tears from his eyes, he pulled Onesimus down onto the grass beside him. "What is the matter, master?" asked Onesimus. "Did anything go wrong at Laodicea?" Archippus gave a shamed little laugh and blew his nose hard. "Nothing but what I might have expected," he replied. "I never told you, Onesimus. I never tell you anything, because you will not let me. But I have always loved her, ever since the day you found her in the canyons. Hardly a day has passed that I have not thought on her. In a way I knew, but in my dreams it is difficult to remember what an ugly, weak creature I am. Only today she saw me for the first time since it happened, and now I know I need not dream any more." "What did she say?" "Oh, not much. She is still a child in some ways. I met her in the street, and she would have passed me by, only I dared to stop and greet her. When she recognized me, she could not mask her horror and concern. She concealed it quickly and asked after my father and you, Onesimus, but she did not want to linger. She bade me farewell as soon as she decently could, and I know now that it is farewell forever." He spoke gladly and quietly, as though his passionate grief had died in the telling. They sat for a few minutes in silence, and then Archippus spoke again haltingly. "I went on into the church. We started with a great love feast, food and drink in profusion. All seemed satisfied, patronizing, lukewarm, and I was like a man starving for living bread and water. Perhaps it was not Christ I was seeking. I wanted her, Onesimus, or, failing her, some human comfort and solace. He knew. He is very merciful toward our weakness." "What do you mean, master?" "Oh, drop that master, can't you? I loathe this master-slave relationship. We were babies together, Onesimus, and you were my friend years before you were my slave. And Christ was merciful. I needed him, but he touched me with a human hand and spoke to me through human lips. You came." "Me?" repeated Onesimus, thoroughly alarmed at this new part he seemed to have played. "Yes, you. You have not spoken to me like that for 2 years, and I want to know now, Onesimus, why you put up those barriers and act like a dead dummy. Is it because I ill-treated you before I knew Christ? Heaven knows how I have repented of my pride and cruelty and deceit. Will you never forgive me?" It was getting dark now, and a sickly moon had risen over the poplars. Deep called to deep, and truth to truth. Truth to truth. Deep called to deep, and truth to truth. There's no troops in that sentence. Sorry about that. "It's not that," said Onesimus. "I forgave you years ago. I think I am afraid of you, or perhaps I am afraid of that Christ who indwells in you." "Afraid of Christ?" Archippus sat up, his troubles forgotten, hope surging in his heart. "How can the dead fear life, or the blind fear light, or the lost sheep fear the shepherd who comes to carry it home? Oh, Onesimus, if only you knew." "I do know," said Onesimus hurriedly, "and I am still afraid." "But of what?" The slave sat silent. How could he tell Archippus how much he feared that light which would shine on his old sin and force him to confess it and cast it on Christ forever? Far better to carry the guilty burden to the grave than that, and it would no doubt shine on that paltry heap of stolen coins and cut across his life's ambition. Far better remain in bondage to sin eternally than risk his chance of calling himself a free man in this world. He suddenly realized that he was desperately afraid now. Love was very near to him, in the tender colors of the sky and the breath of the warm summer night, in the strength and humility of the boy at his side, in the unrecognized presence who indwelt his people. Who could withstand that invasion, and what would be this terrible consequence of yielding? He dared not even consider it, and he rose to his feet in panic. "Come," he said harshly, "let us go home. That is not for me, Archippus. I have told you before, I could never bring my life and my plans into line with that sort of thing, but I am glad it is a comfort to you. You need it. I do not." "You need it desperately," replied Archippus simply, and then fell silent. Onesimus took his young master's arm and led him over the rough ground to the gate of the court where Apphia stood looking out over the dark fields, anxiously watching for her son's return. Onesimus bade him his usual respect good night and turned home. But his mind was in turmoil. That night what he feared had happened to him, as far as he knew, for the first time. According to the Christian jargon, of which he had heard enough to last him until he died, the risen Christ had drawn near to him and called to him as surely as he had drawn near to Archippus when he fell under the feet of the mob. But the price he asked was too high, and Onesimus had made his great refusal. Now let him weigh up the assets and live for them alone, for they were all he had. He drew out his bag of coins and went over and stared down at his mother. She was asleep, breathing very rapidly and tossing restlessly. He shook her gently, and she woke with a start. "Mother," he began, sitting down beside her, "do you remember that night when we sat at the door at the sunset, and you told me all about my father?" She lifted her white face to his, and a little flicker of fear passed over it, but she answered quietly, "I remember, my son." "Mother, do you remember what else you told me that night?" "Yes, I remember." She shivered and started coughing. "Mother, I want to see that little hoard of coins. I want to count them. The time may be very short now, and I must know what is mine." So he had never guessed, and she must tell him. "They were not yours, my son," she said. "They belonged to my mistress. When I turned to Christ, he bade me put away stealing and restore to every man his goods, so I returned them. How could I do otherwise when he called me to walk in the light?" Onesimus clenched his fists. He was alone, forsaken. They had all gone over to this Jesus, and even his own mother had betrayed him. In his fury, he struck out at her in the dark. She fell backward with a little gasp and started coughing again. Terrible, choking coughing. Thoroughly alarmed and bitterly ashamed, he lit a rush and brought her water and helped her to sit up. And as he did so, he saw that her pillow and gown were spattered with blood. Chapter 15. Next morning Onesimus went up to the house and told Apphia that his mother was ill and too weak to rise. Apphia was not surprised, for she had known for a long time that her dear slave was dying. Nerissa did not rise from her bed again. The hut was small and airless, and Apphia wanted to carry her over to her own cool home and care for her there with her own hands, but Nerissa refused to leave her son. So Apphia visited her 2 or 3 times a day and nursed her tenderly, and when Onesimus came home from work, he often found them talking together. And they talked like pilgrims about to set out on some happy journey of their beautiful destination and the loved ones who awaited them. Onesimus went about his duties in an agony of sorrow and remorse, and at night he would sit late beside his mother and tend her himself. Neither had ever mentioned the blow he had given her, but one evening, when he was pouring spring water over her hot hands, his wretchedness was so acute that it cried out to her without words, and she pushed aside the basin and took his hands in both of hers. "Do not grieve, my son," she said. "I know how you felt, and how heavy is the burden of your slavery. And when Christ finds you, you will know too why I acted as I did. It was not the blow you dealt me that made me so ill. I have been sick for a long time, and I have known that I should soon fall asleep in Jesus. And oh, my son, how glad I should be to go, if it were not that I fear to say goodbye to you forever." He clung to her, weeping like a little baby boy. He had not really realized until now that she was dying. "Mother, will you forgive me?" "Peace, my son. My life is already in Christ, and I shall go home. But you are more to me than life, and how shall I rejoice if you are not coming?" She sank back exhausted and soon fell into a feverish sleep, but he lay beside her for a long time, sorrowing and wondering and afraid. His blow had made no impression on her love for him. Indeed, she scarcely seemed to remember it. If human love could be so unquenchable and forgetful of injury, what of that divine love? Perhaps, after all, he could not cast it off as easily as he had imagined. The end came quite soon. A soft summer rain was falling, and she woke suddenly just before dawn. "What is that noise?" she asked. "The rain," answered Onesimus. "It's a good thing the hay is in." "I thought it was the sound of footsteps running to meet me," she said. "The gate is open, and I know now who it was that Stephen saw. But I turned and looked back, and I saw you following hard after the way, so now I can enter in peace. And you, my son—" A violent fit of coughing cut her short, and after that she lay very still. Onesimus sat beside her until he could see her face by the first pale light. Then he knew what had happened, and he ran to waken Apphia. They robed her in white and buried her in the earth, according to the new custom of the Christians. Nobody sorrowed greatly, for they would very soon see her again, and the hymns they sang were full of praise for the glory and rest they would all soon share. Only Onesimus sobbed out his very heart alone in the canyons, and wished he could die. Yet he feared to die. But he turned a stony expression to the world, and hurt Archippus intolerably by the way he kept him and his sympathy at arm's length. Only the pain in Onesimus' eyes and the whiteness of his face could not be hidden, and Apphia and Philemon spoke of it one night in their bedroom. "That poor boy," said Apphia, "I half fear for his reason. He looks as though he will never smile again." "I know," answered Philemon. "He will not accept the comfort we have in Christ, but a change might do him good. The shearing is finished, and in 2 days' time I am sending Glaucus to Laodicea with the last bale of wool. He must bring back the money, and will need a trusty bodyguard. The boy can go with him." Onesimus received the news without any show of pleasure, but his spirits lifted a little. If he could see her and tell her about his mother, he thought he would find some comfort. It was most unlikely that he would see her, for the warehouse was in the middle of the city and her house on the outskirts, and Glaucus could no doubt keep a sharp eye on him. Still, he was young and hopeful, and nothing was impossible. Onesimus was up before dawn on the great day, dressed with special care, and he had the beast laden before Glaucus appeared, bleary and blinking and grumbling. He waddled behind the horse, and Onesimus strode in front, leading the way into the lower valley. It was strange, sultry weather, and no birds sang in the poplars. The hot mist seemed to rise from the fields, and clouds lay low on the mountains. Thunder rumbled round the valley. "The gods must be angry with us," remarked Onesimus. "I expect there will be a real downpour on the way home." He said this purely to annoy Glaucus, who had an unholy fear of offending his own Christian God, and he enjoyed the look of distress on the bailiff's face. Glaucus was old and fat, and hated a wetting, but he never dared reprove Onesimus for anything he said, for from that day to this each had guarded the other's secret. They paused for a hasty meal outside the city, but not for long, for the weather was getting more and more strange. The sky was a smoke red, like some weird lost sunset, although it was only after midday. The streets were almost empty, for the air in the city was oppressive, and most people were indoors taking a siesta. Glaucus, painting and perspiring and glancing at the sky, was very unhappy indeed. "Go and have a rest, Master Bailiff," said Onesimus. "Do your business with Master Polymon, and then spread out the bale in the warehouse courtyard and have a sleep. I will wander about the city for an hour or so, and come back in time to reach home before dark. The evenings are long and light, and there is no need to hurry." "The evening will not be as other evenings," said the old man nervously. "No, no. Stay beside me, young man, and let us start home as soon as we possibly can. This is sick, unhealthy weather, and I fear a storm." By the way, I'm going to insert a footnote right here. What happens in this chapter is actually a historical event. It's, all right, I'll stop. All right. They reached the warehouse just in time, for Polymon was about to go home for dinner. He greeted them somewhat contemptuously, for he thought anyone connected with Philemon the Christian must be a fool. But in money matters Glaucus was no fool, and he watched keenly as the wool was weighed and the payment was calculated and counted and recounted. But at last they were all out in the street, bowing farewell to each other, Glaucus impatient to be off, Onesimus frantically seeking some excuse to stay. And it was then they felt the first tremor. It was a small one, but they all knew what it meant. Earthquakes were common in the Lycus Valley. Already white-faced people were pouring out from the doors of the houses, and the voices of women screaming for their children were heard within, and on all lips was the same cry, "Make for the open spaces! Make for the market! Keep clear of the houses!" Glaucus fled. It was amazing that anyone so old and fat could run so fast. Onesimus seized the horse's bridle and dragged him whinnying toward the center of the market. Polymon stood hesitating in an agony of indecision, and then came the second, stronger tremor. The big houses shuddered and righted themselves. 2 or 3 of the smaller ones fell in like a pack of cards. Onesimus turned to see whether Polymon was following, and saw him dash back into the warehouse, crying out like a man possessed, "My gold! My gold! Oh, ye gods, spare my gold!" Then came the third, last, mighty tremor, and the whole city seemed to collapse with a rumble and crash around the fugitives in the market square. The warehouse had suddenly disappeared, and in its place stood a great heap of stone and brick. Onesimus shuddered as he thought of Master Polymon lying far below the stone and plaster, clutching his gold with dead hands. But his mind was concerned neither with Polymon, nor with Glaucus, trembling and gasping in the middle of the market, nor with his own safety. The big houses on the circumference of the town were less damaged than those in the center, and she might well be safe. But whether she was above ground or under the rubble, he must reach her at once. His own life was of little account. In fact, his heart leapt at the thought of laying it down for her sake. He slipped the horse's halter over a post and struck out for the Hierapolis gate. He knew the way well, for he had trodden it so often in imagination. But even so, it was hard going. Whole streets were blocked, and people knelt in the rubble, weeping and calling on the gods and scrabbling with their hands. as they scrabbled with their hands. In places, great pillars swayed unsteadily, and the townsfolk were swarming to the gates to take refuge in the meadows and the hills. Over the heaps of stone, brick, plaster, and dust, over great slabs of marble, through crowds of dazed men and women and crying children, Onesimus fought his way to the house on the hill. He could see from some distance away that the roof had fallen in, but the walls were still standing. He strode in at the gate, and she ran straight to him and clung to him. My father, she cried. Where is he? Have you seen him? Is he safe? He looked down at her ashen face, her hair and dress still white with plaster, a great bruise swelling up on her forehead, and he could not tell her the truth all at once. Has the warehouse fallen? I believe that most of the houses in the center fell. She gave a groan and covered her face with her hands. Mistress Irene, there may yet be another tremor. The people are flocking to the gates. It's better that we go. If you like, I will take you back with me to Colossae, and Mistress Apphia will care for you. She shook her head. No, no, she cried. My father may yet come, and I must wait for him. They will dig in the ruins, and whether dead or alive, I must see him again. But you must wait outside the gates. Where is your governess? I have had no governess this past year. The slaves all ran away as fast as they could. Take me to Euphron's hut, Onesimus. He is my father's shepherd, and his wife will take me in. There is no one else. Her natural control was coming back to her, and she had ceased to cling to him. Despite her unkempt appearance, she stood there like some lonely little queen, facing her fate with dignity. His heart ached to take her in his arms and comfort her, but he dared not presume on her plight. Never before had his slavery seemed such an insuperable obstacle. Come, Irene, he said gently, taking her hand, for her eyes were still fixed on the cratered road to the town, and she lingered. We must go now, at once. I will take you to your shepherd and his wife, and leave you there in safety. But there is no time to lose. One more tremor, and the gate may fall. She came at once, and he led her out into the street, drawing her on through the crowds. Most of the people were heading for Hierapolis or Colossae, and some of them, too exhausted to travel or wounded, were planning to camp by the river. Euphron's wattle hut was off the beaten track in a small grove of trees. It was a peaceful place, surrounded by lawns of wild flowers where the sheep grazed. The tremors had barely shaken the hidden valley, but Euphron and his wife Antonia were already climbing the slopes toward the town, and Irene, letting go of Onesimus' hand, ran straight into the old woman's arms, weeping. My father, she sobbed. The warehouse has fallen, and I think he is dead. Then you shall come with me, little mistress, and be our daughter until the day we can restore you to your inheritance. See, I will take you back to our home where you can rest. And Euphron, you go on to the town and seek further news of Master Polemon. And wherever you find homeless or motherless little ones, bring them here, and we will shelter them for Christ's sake. She turned back and led Irene into the hut. It was clean and cool and strewn with rushes, and Antonia laid her on a straw pallet and brought her milk and bathed her bruise and comforted her as one comforts a little lost child. Then, as the old woman turned, she noticed Onesimus lingering in the doorway. She looked at Irene questioningly, and as she did so, she traced a swift sign with her finger on the pillow, and Irene almost imperceptibly shook her head. Come in, boy, said Antonia kindly. Sit and rest a while, and tell us more of the disaster. You yourself look white and shaken. Are you a citizen of Laodicea? And has your home fallen? Onesimus sat down in the doorway and told them all he knew, except that Polemon had died trying to rescue his gold. He had not the heart to tell them that. It would come to light soon enough. And now, what next? There was nothing to stay for. Irene was safe, and Euphron would soon return with a collection of howling waifs and orphans. Antonia has gone to the well to fetch fresh water, and he and Irene were alone. Well, I had better go, he said, rising, and going over to the pallet where she lay. He gave her his hand and the old greeting. Goodbye, little Mistress Irene. We shall meet again. She looked up, arrested, and a faint color tinged her white cheeks. He had come to her and stood by her like a rock in the storm, and she suddenly realized that when the ceiling had crashed on her, and she had fled out alone into the garden, and found herself forsaken, she had known he would come, and having found him, she had known she was safe. She wanted him to stay forever, but she was 14 now, and it would be unmaidenly to say so. So she just held his hand in both of hers and said, Thank you, Onesimus. I knew you would come, and we shall meet again. He let go her hand and stumbled out into the early evening, his blood thundering and his eyes smarting, and a mighty resolve growing in his heart. So, she had known that he would come. She had not forgotten. In her terror and fear of death, she had remembered him and known that he would come. Now nothing should stand in his way. He would go away now tonight and never return until he could walk through the gates of Laodicea as a free man and claim her. The city was strangely quiet, apart from the pitiful little groups tearing at the stones and rubble with bleeding hands, while slaves dug frantically beside them. The lower streets were partly flooded by fountains and sewers, and a sour smell hung over everything. Onesimus found Glaucus and the horse still standing in the middle of the market, as the old man had been too afraid to move. He was very angry with Onesimus, but as usual he dared not show it. Come, come, cried Glaucus, his teeth still chattering, so that he could hardly speak. It is high time we started for Colossae. The night will overtake us before we reach the upper plain. Where have you been, Onesimus? Never mind where I have been, replied the boy. Hoist yourself up on the horse, and we shall go. He lifted the old man into the saddle and led the frightened horse over the ruins to the southern Syrian gate. They were halfway down the hill to the highway when they suddenly jerked on the bridle and drew the horse behind a screen of cypress trees. Glaucus, he said in a tone of authority he had never used before, hand over that money in your wallet. The old man's eyes nearly started out of his head, and his face turned a muddy yellow. The money, Onesimus? Our master's money? Are you mad? No, not mad, just in a hurry. Hand it over, Glaucus. If you refuse, I shall go straight to our master on our return and tell him all I know. You have always hated me. Now is your chance to get rid of me. Go home alone and tell Philemon that Polemon and I and the gold perished under the warehouse. The frightened bailiff made one more attempt. I, too, have my secret, Onesimus. If you tell of me, I shall tell of you. For the love of God, end this foolish talk and take me home. Glaucus, said the boy, hand over that money, or I shall strangle you. I care not what you tell of me, for I have nothing to lose. Christians do not brand, and as for the rods, I tasted them when I was young and weak, and I can stand them again without flinching. I care not a straw for my reputation, but you, Glaucus, do you relish being beaten by some low menial and your stewardship being taken away from you? And what about your comfortable, honored old age? And what about your cozy seat in the church? Think twice, Glaucus. He needed no further persuasion. Slobbering and trembling, the old man flung the packet of gold on the ground and turned the horse's head. Go, thief, villain, he shouted with a most unchristian-like curse, and may you never come back again. That will depend on how well you can persuade them that it is useless to search for me, replied Onesimus. He skipped down the hill and turned his back on Colossae. The open highway and the wide world lay before him. And that is where we will end. No, not a volcano. It was an earthquake, Granny Bear. So, but it is a true historical event. There is all kinds of archaeological evidence that there was this earthquake that happened in Laodicea during the reign of Emperor Nero, and why not when it happened in this story, because, why not? So that's where we're going to end it for tonight. I hope you are enjoying the story. Why the red sky? I have no idea. I hope you're enjoying the story. You've lived through more earthquakes than I have, Granny Bear. So, I don't know. I don't know if there's a thing with the red sky or what, but it was an earthquake that happened. So here's Kimberly and Daniel, who both have something to share. JJ looks like he is asleep. I don't know for sure.
Oh, he's out. He's been out for a half hour.
Yeah, Mom says he's been out for a half hour. So I'm going to get up and go move to a safer location. All right.
When he says safer, I'm not sure if he means safe from our drawings. Because mine's pretty cool.
Well, mine is cooler. I made a World War III drawing. And
I hope that never
World War
happens.
III?
yeah.
Ooh.
I hope that never happens.
Wow.
Granny Bear says thank you for the story.
All right.
Okay. Bye. Good night.
So I hope everybody's enjoying the story. We will see you again tomorrow night. And God bless you. She says nice drawings. God bless you. Have a good evening. And we will... Wow, that's so cool. I love the drawings.
From Jessica.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us. We really appreciate you. We appreciate you. All right. So that's all I'm going to sing of that, because that's the only words that I know of it. All right. So anyway, I hope that you have a good night. And we'll talk to you later.